Okay, so here we are on our 9th in the series of Inside Out Transformation, the book gatherings. This has been a celebration for the last 2 months, really. The book was launched on the 1st of June, and we're still celebrating. And I think I was thinking about this earlier on. It took me, it had a gestation period of 3 years at least, this book. So I think 3 months of celebration is well in order. So I can just keep celebrating. So I'm delighted that today we have with us Christine Heath. And Christine's all the way, calling in all the way from Hawaii. We're just discussing about the time zones there and the difference, how different it is for me anyway over here in Europe. So I just wanted to read out a little bit of Chris's official bio, and then we're going to get into asking some juicy questions, if that's all right. So Christine Heath has over 40 years of experience providing 3 principles-based therapy, supervision and training. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist, master addictions counsellor, and is Hawaii certified as a substance abuse counsellor. She was a first-generation student of Sydney Banks and continues to provide international training, consultation and coaching to anyone that wants to awaken to the power of the understanding uncovered by Sid. She's the co-author of The Secret of Love, Unlock the Mystery, Unleash the Magic. And she currently co-hosts a podcast with Judy Sedgman called Psychology Has It Backwards. So welcome, Chris. Really lovely to have you here. And I'd love to start with your podcast title, because I think that's very courageous. to say psychology has it backwards. I mean, really, we're it's a bit like the Inside Out for me. It feels very much like a new paradigm when I'm having to come up with new ways of describing it. I'm creating some Amazon ads at the moment and having to come up with these one-liners and things. So it's really making me think and delve deeper and get more creative about how I speak about it. So I love this. Psychology has it backwards. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that came about and why? I mean, yeah, I love the podcast as well. It's a great resource for clients, Ellen says. And yeah, I love you and Judy are just great together. You just really are. I can tell you've got a great connection. Yeah. So how did it come about and how's it going?
Well, we were in the middle of the pandemic, and we were kind of in the middle of looking at how to bring greater diversity and inclusion in the 3 principles community. And in the process of awakening to what we needed to do about that, to really see that we were not being inclusive in terms of people of color and people of indigenous tribes and people, just various people around the world. We kind of were starting to look at about what we were doing in terms of getting this out in the world and how we needed to reach all people. And we were waking up to that. And as we woke up to that, we decided, we were talking about how, psychology just is, not going in the right direction yet. I mean, they're closer. They're like walking backwards towards us, but they're still going in the wrong direction. And so we decided that we were both getting old, and we got nothing to lose. Our insecurity about what other people will think about us wasn't there anymore. So we said, let's just go for it. Let's call it Psychology Has It Backwards. And so that's where it came from. It just kind of came out of a conversation we had, and we decided to go for it. And we thought maybe we'd get 20 or 30 episodes, and we're now doing number 90. So, and we've got more to go. We've got still a list of 4 or 5. We come up with new topics all the time. And really, and it was interesting because even one of our colleagues called us up and said, "Oh, Chris, you can't call it that." I said, "Well, why not?" And she said, "Well, people will get upset." I said, "Good. We've been actually walking around being really nice and sweet and coming from a good feeling. And has that gotten anywhere? No. So let's just try being a little bit more forthright and say what we mean." And so that's kind of where it came from. And ever since that, we've had a really good time doing that. We love doing it. We have lots of fun. So we're both involved in the field in different ways. And so we get ideas frequently from the field itself and whatever their thinking is that they're up to. And also from listeners, they send in things. Could you please talk about this? Could you talk about that? And so we come up with new topics on a regular basis. Sometimes we repeat because we realize we didn't get the whole thing the first time. But the other thing we learned from it was really how to get a message across in 20-25 minutes. And that was something that was really like, oh my God, how are we going to do this? And it turned out to be really easy. One of the things that we try to do is just keep it really keep our podcast talking about how the principles play out in life and the practical living of this understanding. Rather than talking about the principles, we talk about how it works and how life works. And that's what's fun, because we're learning as we go as well. So that's the fun part of it, really. It's like, oh yeah, and then this, you see it again. It's like you wake up to it. It's like, oh yeah, and then they think this. Oh yeah, that's right. Because we've been kind of cloistered in the world of the three principles for the last 40 years. And in many ways, I mean, there's different times when I've had to interact with the traditional field of psychology. But each time I do, I come up with new material. So that's kind of the fun part of it. And, the field is really, bless everybody's heart that's trying to help people. That's all I got to say is that, it's the most important thing in terms of helping people is really that feeling of love for the person and being able to really listen without having anything on your mind. And there are lots of really beautiful people that can do that. But what we do, and that's different, is we really look at life from a different perspective. So it's not like a different model, it's a totally different way of looking at human beings. So when you talk with the field, they're used to talking in models. Well, what's your school of thought? What's your model that you work from? And it's not really a model, it's just a different understanding. So as the fields kind of come along, like when I first got involved in helping people, it was in the 70s, when I was about 5. And no, it was just a joke. And at that time, being positive in therapy was considered bad therapy. You were not connecting with the person's pathology, and you were like being airy-fairy about their problems and not taking it seriously. And then as time has gone on, even before that in the 60s, kind of social work was one of the major ways that people were helped. And one of the things that they did is they built these big housing complexes as a way to deal with the slums. And they moved everybody into these big housing complexes, thinking that if you could change the outside world, then people would operate differently in life. And then they discovered that didn't help. The level of consciousness of people that were trying to survive in those didn't have a shift in it. And so they lived in the same way they were living before. So they had to end up tearing all those down. And so we stopped kind of focusing so much on changing the outside and started looking at like, oh, okay, let's look at how people are behaving. Let's change their behavior in different ways. And then we're looking at feelings, and let's express our feelings and share our feelings. And I used to do this stuff with people with bataka sticks, which are these sticks with a pad on the end, and you'd hit pillows with it and go, I'm angry, I'm so angry. Like feelings and emotions were something you could like expel from yourself and then or hold inside. And then we kind of got back to thinking and how the content of thinking worked, and how that creates your behaviors and your feelings. And what we're doing is taking it one step back from that. And so when you're looking at the inside and you're looking at innate health and the state of mind that produces the world a person lives in, you have to look at it in the opposite direction. You have to see how it's created from the inside out, rather than how the outside world, whether it's the family or the living situation or the trauma that, everything's like trauma informed now. And so it's still looking at the past as the source of people's dysfunction in the present. And so instead of looking at what people are, creating in their life and trying to change, it's because it's after the fact. If you think about it, even cognitive therapy is changing the content of thought, but you already thought it. So why would you bother changing it? It's like it doesn't matter. And when you go back and you try to solve problems of things that happened in the past, it's already done and over with it. That particular thing's probably never going to happen exactly like that ever again. So trying to kind of go over that and figure that out is a waste of time. When people understand principle, then they have something that they can go out into the world in and operate no matter what comes their way. So it's kind of like you can be on this great adventure walking into the unknown, and you've got all the tools you need to handle whatever comes. And there's a lot of crap that comes. Life has stuff that's scary and stuff that's sad and things that we experience in difficult ways. But if you understand how to keep your bearings in the midst of the storm, hey, there's nothing better than that. Then getting through the storm is like, oh, okay, we made it through that. Now what's, and there's a lot that you learn in that, lot of experiences that happen. And, not that you'd want to repeat them so many times, but it's just a wonderful, wonderful thing if you just turn around and look at everything from a different perspective. It's a very subtle change, isn't it? Looking at how the function that the principles play and the way that we create reality versus looking at changing people's reality. Because it's just a step late. That was a long answer to that question.
No problem at all. That's great. It's funny, just the point you're just making. We were just discussing that was the last line in one of your answers to my question, was that mental well-being comes before the ability to process anything. We were just having a conversation about that. And that's what I heard in what you just shared. It's before anything.
Yeah, and knowing that is just such a great is such a great saving. I'm doing these groups right now for men who are violent, and it's just the most beautiful thing in the world, because we just had group last night, so it's on my mind. But we have men in the group that were in prison for 13, 15 years, and now they're out, and they're getting some of the deepest insights of anybody in the group, because they're really listening and they really want to see how to do their life better. And they're, many of them didn't graduate from high school, and they're really like, one of the guys is living in a homeless shelter, and he did 2 stints in prison, and he's out, and he said, we asked them, like, given what you're learning now about the principles, what do you see about what happened that got you to this group? And they almost all answered the question in a deeper way than I was anticipating. What they said was that they wouldn't do it over again. They would do whatever they did, because getting to this group has changed their life so much that they didn't have any thoughts about what they could have, would have, should have done. Right? They just said, like, and that's a deeper answer, because you could hear in their voice that they felt a shift inside of them. They were calmer, they were more loving, and they were hopeful for the first time that their life could be different. And it was different. So it's one of the guys is so funny. He started laughing. He said, all of us guys, our mind has just been tricking us. And I said, yeah, that's right. And to keep it so simple, like I was reading Missing Link the other day, and Sid goes, it's just common sense. Just keep it at common sense, And so the more you keep it simple, and that's one of the things that Judy and I like to do in our podcast, you just keep things simple. I'm not a great intellect, I never have been. And that's one of the reasons I think I love this work so much, because I didn't have to indulge in a lot of intellectual processes. But if you look at the field, it's like somebody just sent out a flyer to me of a training they're doing, talking about adult childhood challenges. And they're talking about how the past affects people, and they were talking about how they're going to lift the veil of understanding to see that psychology has affected people in a negative way, but then they go on to this really intellectual discussion about it. And I had to look up two of the words actually to see what they meant. There were such uncommon vocabulary, but that's what we do, is just really common sense. It's just, how do you live your life in a way that is coming from the feelings that you want to live in? How do you live your life in a way that's based on love? How do you live your life in a way that's based on happiness? How do you live your life that's based on peacefulness, quietude? Because there's such a power in that. And it's very simple. But if you get talking about it too much, you lose it. In fact, there's a great paragraph in the missing link that I just was reading the other day, where Sid, here it is. It says, "My words may seem too simple, but I say again, the truth is simple. Look for common sense, plain old-fashioned common sense. When seeking wisdom, one is apt to find that in simplicity lies complexity. Those who don't realize the profound nature of such simplicity are very apt to expound on their findings, losing the essence." So when we get up in our head and we get thinking about it too much, we lose the feeling. That's kind of the more beautiful way of saying that. But that's what I think is the most important, is to help people see how to live their life in a way that is not painful. It's not scary. And knowing that you have that reservoir of wisdom inside of you and health inside of you, no matter what, and you know that can get you through anything. What else?
I was going to ask you to talk about the deeper feeling, but I think we've started down that road, because when I was rereading the chapter before the call, a lot of what you share in your sharing in the answering my questions speaks the deeper feeling. You talked about the story when you first came across the principles, and how you had a feeling, but then you realized there was a deeper feeling. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think some people don't really understand what that means, because you didn't at the beginning. From the way you answered the question, you didn't really understand what that meant. It would just be really, really good if you could do your best to describe what the difference is between a good feeling and a deeper feeling, I guess.
Well, sometimes people will talk about the good feeling, and then people get thoughts about what that is, right? So like, oh, good feeling, being happy, being, like positive. But a deeper feeling is really a feeling of knowing, where you drop down into this space where you know what you are. You know that you are that beautiful feeling. And so it comes out in many different ways. I mean, certainly being happy is the product of understanding. Actually, the product of that state of mind, whether you understand or not. But I remember when I first went to my first training, I was absolutely burned out to crispy, like I was waking up every hour on the hour. I was so stressed out. I was unhappy. I couldn't find any man to marry me so I could be happy. And I tried all kinds of things. I kind of knew like there's something spiritual that's missing. So I studied with a psychic for a while, and I did all kinds of stuff because I was searching. I knew there was something missing, but it wasn't. Um, I was looking outside of myself for it, right? As I was trying to really help other people to be happy and to live in a more beautiful feeling, but I was trying to do it by changing what was wrong with them. And that's what I was doing with myself. So I went to this training because I thought maybe if I went to psychology conferences, it would be a better place to meet a man than bars. Because I don't know, I kept finding alcoholics in bars. And so I thought, oh, this will be better. So that was the only reason I went. And in the morning session, I was the person in the audience who's asking all the obnoxious questions. Like I am like arguing and telling him like women are abused in this world. That's true. And he would answer me and his answers would go over my head. But I thought that everybody else in the room who were like more higher educated than I was understood it. So I thought, oh, don't keep asking the question. People will know you're really not very smart. And then we broke for lunch. And at the time I had a clinic, and all the people that worked in my clinic, we all sat down and had lunch together, and we were kind of bad mouthing what Roger was talking about. And we were like, oh, what we do is good too. And it's not any different. This isn't anything new, blah, blah, blah. Nobody could hear anything. And I got up from the table. It was a kind of a weird thing. I got up from the table and I walked away, and time kind of stopped. And when you watch TV and the main character keeps walking and everybody else is like stopped in time, well, that happened. And I turned around and everybody was at the table. And then I turned back around and Roger was leaving. Now, by this time, I knew Roger was single because he told stories about himself. So I was thinking about dinner, and that definitely got my hope up. That definitely got my feeling up. And so he came up to me, and of course he came up to me because I was the troublemaker in the group. Now I understand what he was doing. And when he would talk to me, he talked to me from this feeling that felt like he was stroking my soul. It like when you rub velvet, the feeling that you get, that's kind of how it felt to me. It's like psychologically, it just felt like it was like melted butter. It was just so smooth. And so we went back in the afternoon, and I thought, gosh, I might have dinner with this guy. I better pay attention to what he's talking about. And so I started listening, right? And I started listening, and I thought, positive. I could do positive. And then we had another break, and I went up to this physician who at the time I thought doctors were like one step down from God. And this doctor came up to me and I said, well, what do you think about this? And he said, well, I think it's common sense. So I was like, well, if a doctor thinks this isn't weird, then maybe I should listen. So I go back in the afternoon. Now I got big ears, right? And Roger put up this little diagram, and all of a sudden my world just turned around, like, whoa, and then whoa, and then whoa. And it was like, oh, I'm doing everything backwards. So that's where the name for the podcast came from, is that in that moment, I realized that I was looking at life backwards, and that my training had taught me that everything did. And it was like, you know how when people die, their life flashes before their eyes. Well, all the things that I had misinterpreted flashed in front of my eyes. And it was like, oh, and I started laughing. I started laughing for the next 3 days. And I just couldn't stop laughing because I thought it was such a big joke that I'd spent $25,000 and 7 years in therapy analyzing what I made up. So it was pretty funny. And so now I'm like, I think I'm in the best feeling a human being could possibly get into. I am like just so awake, so alive, that felt like this energy just flowing through me. And Roger left. I did not have dinner with him, but he left, and I stayed in that feeling for 6 weeks. Then I had signed up to do a 3-week training down in Florida, and I got stressed going down there because, of course, I'm the most important person in the world, so everything had to be done before I left, and I got myself kind of going too fast. And I went down there, and Dr. Suarez was talking to me about living in a deeper feeling. And I was like, doesn't he know? I got that feeling. I had this huge experience. I totally changed. I mean, what's he talking to? I already know this. And my wisdom came in and said, shut up and just listen. And so I got quiet. I started listening, and all the people down there, they were talking about this deeper feeling. And my little pea brain was trying to tell me, like, oh, we know what that is. We were in a nice feeling. And then all of a sudden I realized that they were talking about something deeper than that. It just, like, I just could feel it. I knew it. And whatever that was, I wanted to find out what that was. And as it happened, Sydney Banks came down for his vacation while I was there and invited me to meet with him. And all of a sudden, I just dropped into this deeper feeling of knowing. And it's hard to describe that deeper feeling, but you can, when you talk, you can feel it come through you. And it's not about being positive or happy or anything. It's just about really knowing that you are what you're looking for. And that hasn't stopped in 40 years. I mean, I'm still learning about that, which is what is, to me, the most cool thing in the world. There are very few people at my age that are still working, and certainly not starting new projects. I told somebody I started a new project for men that are violent, and they go, "You're starting new projects?" I go, "Well, yeah, why not?" And they said, "Well, aren't you going to retire?" I said, "I don't know how to retire from this work, really. I don't know how to retire from this work because it's so much fun, and I learned so much, and there's so much work to be done. I mean, who's got time to sit around and lollygag?" But that's just kind of the process that I go through. And so it's hard to describe, but you can feel it when it comes through. Like, you can tell when we do a talk or we do conferences, the feeling gets really deep. And that's the feeling that you want to be looking for. And the only way to get that is to just stay open, know it's there, and go in that direction as best you can, and it'll surprise you. It'll surprise you. We've gotten to a place where we can talk about the principles really intellectually, and people then get frustrated, and they try to stop thinking. They're thinking about not thinking, right? And instead of just really letting yourself see for yourself. Like George, I don't know if you guys know this, but George Pransky has a new book out. It's called Life is a Metaphor. And that's one of Sid's quotes that he has in there, is that you have to find it for yourself, in yourself.
Beautiful, thanks. That's why I said if you can describe it, because I know it's kind of speaking to the indescribable in a way. But thank you for sharing your story again. Yeah. Beautiful. I always remember when we talked for the book about that. You said, yeah, it's like when you with Roger Mills, it was like stroking velvet. I think that bit got edited out, but I love that. I love that line, like stroking velvet. It's just, yeah, it could just transport you to that feeling. Yeah, that feeling, and the feeling of knowing. Yeah. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, children, when they have a blankie and they're like touching it too, that's the other thing. It's just this way that we know that feeling is what soothes us. it soothes the mind.
Well, I was going to say, I'm going to open it up to see if anybody has any questions. I know some people had to jump off, but if anybody has a question, Rick, go ahead, unmute yourself.
Hey, thanks, Sheila, and thanks, Christine.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was the last podcast you had or the one before, but you and Judith there had an insight around feelings.
Feeling and feelings, yeah.
Yeah, and there's, I don't know if it's a contradiction or what I'm hearing, but I remember Sid saying, when you find yourself in a feeling, as opposed to chasing a feeling or looking for a feeling, for me, you sort of drop into it, like you fall into it. You notice that you're in that feeling. I don't know if I'm articulating it or saying it the way.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Because see, when you're trying, you're thinking.
Yeah.
When you're trying, you have to just be like, interesting. That's what I want. I want something, so you have to let it go. You can't, we're just so trained that we can somehow control life with our thoughts instead of be part of it. Yeah. And that's hard because people when they're insecure, they get impatient. I want it now, I don't want to wait, but it sneaks up on you. And everybody has experiences doing that, whether they know it or not. It's just what the principles bring. What Sid's words tell us is that it's there, right? It's there inside of us. And once you start to catch on to that, then you catch on to yourself and how your own thinking kind of gets in the way of doing that. That's one of I don't know if we did that podcast has come out yet or not, but it really kind of getting to know yourself so that you know your own little games that you play, the ways that you get caught up in thinking is honestly the best thing you can do for yourself. And everybody's different. So it's just that kind of awareness, and then it hits you when you're least expecting it. Like I didn't go to that conference looking for a new understanding of life. I went to look for a husband, which is the only way I thought I could be happy. And I didn't get that, but I got what I was looking for. So it's a great example. It's like, if you're looking for love, you want to live in love. To me, it's like I just make a request. Okay, mind, I need to see what's going on. I'm going too fast here. And then all of a sudden it's like changes without me doing anything. Yeah, that's a great, it's hard to talk about it because people tend to think that feelings are your emotions, whether you're happy, sad, glad. But when we talk about a deeper feeling, we're talking about the essence of life, really, is being a part of that and recognizing that you are a part of that. So what consciousness allows us to see is that we are a part of that, and we also have our own personal experience of life. But a lot of times when people listen to feelings, they get, I see online people get into discussions about your feelings and sharing your feelings and blah, blah, blah. But that's not really what Sid's talking about. He's talking about living in a feeling of security where you're secure in life. And that's like when people are looking for a good feeling, you're trying to figure out how to have whatever their version of it is that they've formed in their mind. But looking to just be a secure person makes you instantly more loving, happier. All that comes from that. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I like that episode that we did on feeling versus feelings. The last one we did that we've gotten a lot of great feedback to was about, is it a thing or is it a thought? Because people tend to look at themselves and create things like my relationship or my anxiety or my job, or, it's like there are these things and people don't realize that they're not really things. They're just thoughts. They're just thoughts you have. So you're not stuck with anything.
It kind of happened to me with a pile of rubbish the other day. I mean, it was just a pile of rubbish, but Lord, boy, did I create something out of that rubbish. That was, it was charged with emotions and feelings and extra thinking. I was on a train of making people wrong, but it was interesting because I was able to notice what I was doing. Like I was observing, like this is not going to go anywhere. And I dropped into that feeling of there's nothing more I can do other than just take care of the rubbish. And so I took care of the rubbish in a beautiful feeling, but every once in a while that little irky thing would come back and I'd go, oh, there it is again, and just let it go. And it sort of had a half-life to it, so like every time it would creep in, it would be, oh, a little less, oh, just get away. But
Yeah.
I tell you, it could have gone so wrong, right? Because that ucky, crappy feeling I was having and letting go, taking this pile of rubbish to the dump was a beautiful feeling. It's like, and got to listen to your podcast too. So there you go.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Yeah.
Right.
It's that's the beauty of it, isn't it? Is you can do something crappy, something that triggers crappy memories, something that does it, and you know what to do. Like, oh, there it is again. It's like it kind of. That's why I often think about my intellect is like the pimp that lives in my head, because he's always trying to get back in control. And he's trying to tell me about my life in a way that gets me thinking about it, gets me insecure, gets me negative. And it is kind of like, get out of here. Where's that thought? Who just had that thought? Where'd that come from? And when you get that experience of you're not your thoughts, it just really saves you. These guys that I work with, they frequently, when they come to me, they don't have it. Like one guy came, this eye swollen shut, a cut in his eye. And I said, what happened to you? Oh, I got in a fight. Well, that's why they come to me, right? Because they get into fights. But it's just seeing how your thinking can overcome. And when you don't know how it works, it feels like you're being run by these thoughts that come in your head. And the thoughts seem like they're coming from God. Remember this, you should be upset about this. Oh, that's right. That's true. I should be upset about that. Right. And you have this, like, it's almost like you're talking to somebody else. Like sometimes when you're really into it, you can, like you're by yourself and you start talking to yourself. Isn't that crazy that we're talking to our own thoughts as if our thoughts have life of their own, but they don't. There's no intelligence in the intellect. Intelligence comes from the gift of life. It's just information. Can be just as misinformation as you can get on the internet. Yeah.
Lovely. Does anybody else have a question for Christine? Or is it continue on mine? I'm enjoying a beautiful feeling. Thank you, Christine, listening to you. That was great. Really cool.
Thank you for asking me.
I have a practical sort of question that came to mind. When people come to your clinic, so one of the lines in the book was something about I don't fix people, or something like that. And it made me wonder, when people come knowing nothing about the principle, obviously, clearly, they just turn up and they probably want fixing, because that's what people turn up for therapy, counselling, coaching for a lot of the time, is they've come for a fix. So how do you start out? How do you explain to them how you work?
I don't sometimes. I just
Don't
start
you?
working with them. No, because everybody knows the principles. It's not like, you have to introduce a strange concept. Everyone knows at one level that they are the principles, right? And so at first, when I'm working with somebody, I'm just listening for what's going on with them. I'm listening to the level of consciousness they're at. I'm listening for the what I think might help them, and then I'll talk to them about the way that I work is to help them to uncover and live in a healthier state of mind. And I haven't had anybody say, no, I don't want to learn that. I don't think I've had anybody in 40 years that said that. Maybe one or two. But by and large, that's why people are coming, right? They want help. And unfortunately, like Judy and I do what we call the program, which is 2 groups that we do each week for people that can attend and come in and talk. And a lot of people that come have been in the mental health system for a long time. So it depends on how much contamination they have in terms of how they've been conditioned to do therapy. Sometimes I have to talk about, they don't have to come in and talk about their problems, but usually when people come in, I'm just talking to them about how to understand how they work rather than teaching them the principles. I'm helping them to see how the principles work. And because most people are not interested in like, oh, mind, thought, and consciousness, blah, blah, blah. But they do know like, oh, yeah, okay, my thoughts seem real to me, right? Doesn't matter why they seem real to them. Like if you're going to teach it, you might want to know that. But in real life, if you know that that's something simple, like my thoughts seem real and they might not be accurate, that saves people from a lot of bad behavior and damaging kinds of things. So it's more, I'm talking to people about their life and about their health and how they can live in health. And most people have no clue how it works. So it's really fascinating. And then they start feeling better. So they have bigger ears. And then as they're listening more, they might ask questions. I have them listen to Sydney Banks tapes. I have them reading Sydney Banks's books frequently. Once in a while, I'll refer them to other books, but mostly I just stick with Sid's books. Second Chance, Enlightened Gardener, Missing Link. Sometimes I read to them from Missing Link, but it's just really just practical. How can I be a better parent? How can I be a better spouse? How can I have a better relationship? That's why they come. So usually I set the tone by letting them know that if they're in a healthy state of mind, they will be the best partner in the world. They will be the best parent in the world, and that there's nothing wrong with them. And that's a huge burden off their shoulders. So they want to hear more of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. If somebody comes along with depression, it's the same thing. You're saying, well, we're going to help you have a healthier state of mind and you won't be struggling with depression anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that psychology does is it creates these illnesses that don't really exist. So people are big on diagnoses and kind of fixing what's wrong with them. And that's another way that we make things out of things is, I have this condition, I have this anxiety, I have this depression. And so when they start to see that they are more than that, and that's just how their thinking has created their experience to date, and that there's hope for them, that's so powerful. That gets their attention. Frequently, the analysis and the kind of overthinking themselves is one of the things that is the hardest to get over from traditional therapy, because everybody's like into analyzing themselves so much and what's wrong with them, and analyzing everybody else in their family and what's wrong with them. So this focus on, trying to make everybody else change so that I can be happy. But getting that shift takes sometimes longer than others. But I'm just really personal with a person, like I want to know like what's going on with you. So one of the things that happens in this community is that we say we don't talk about problems. Well, what does that mean? We don't talk about problems. If somebody comes in to see me and they are coming because they have a problem, I listen to what their problem is. But when I'm listening to what is it that they don't see in terms of their own psychological functioning that would help them to find their own answer to that problem. So instead of solving it in terms of intellectually solving it, we don't do that, but we just listen to people. You're just listening to make it relevant to the person. If they can't see how this would work with them, they're not going to be really interested in getting help from you.
Yeah, relevance is a huge part of it, I guess. So one of the questions. Sorry.
I'm just going to say, it's kind of like what I do with any client is I'll do anything, whatever happens to come to mind in the moment. But mostly I'm looking to see when they're in their health and to identify that so they can see that they've had that. So they might talk about their past. And when they talk about their past, what I do is I'm listening for when they had wisdom, when they saw something different, and that you can always hear it. And as people start to see that about themselves, then they understand, oh, okay, oh yeah. Okay, so that's why I get upset about this. Yeah, okay. And when they see it, then it doesn't affect them as much. It's like Rick was just talking about, the thoughts still come in their head, but it's like each time it does, it's less gripping, it's less intense, and pretty soon it just kind of falls away. And they do, it's like our thoughts always think that we have what's it called? Visitation, like, how when people get a visitation from a spirit, we get visitations from our insecure thinking. Comes back in every once in a while just to see if it can get its foot in the door again.
Or more than once in a while for some people, I think. It can be a regular occurrence, but it's getting to recognize that and know that. I think you said that earlier on, that the more that we can see what type of thinking is our habitual type of thinking, that's going to, I suppose, not sabotage us, but be prevalent. But it's good to notice. It's good to recognize that type of thinking and know that it means nothing, right? It's like,
but when people have struggle with this, usually they're caught up in thinking that they don't see. Like one of the men in my men's group was he just wasn't slowing down, and he was like, I'm really trying, and so I had him come in for an individual session. I said, tell me about your life, like tell me about what's happened and he said, well, when I was 22, I was driving this car, and I was with my girlfriend, and we came back from the beach, and I was dehydrated, and I lost consciousness while I was driving home and had a head-on crash with a truck, and my fiance was killed. And so he said, so I've just felt really guilty about that my whole life. And that's kind of what's going on. So I said, oh, okay, well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about how the past gets carried through time. And what's carried through time is not the incident, but it's what you made of it. And what you made of it seems like it's real and true. So then he's like, oh, he starts to see it. And then he's able to quiet down, right? Because there's something getting in the way there. So sometimes when you just listen, you just like, okay, I'm not, like I always think, I'm not getting through this person. I'm doing battle with something here I can't see. So I just go back to listening and really just know that, whatever's happened to us in our life frequently gets on our eyeballs, as Roger Mills would say. And then we start to see life through that perception. And we don't know it because it's been years and years and years. So it looks like it's life and not our thoughts.
Yeah. If nobody has any more questions, it's probably a good time to say, Christine, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
You can, I've got a website, Hawaii Counseling and Education Center.com. I've got my email is my name, Christine J. Heath @gmail. And Psychology has it backwards. You can always get a hold of me through that website as well.
Yeah, and if people could look for that podcast on any podcast platform that they use, right? Somebody was asking me in the chat, and I kind of said that. So,
The Secret of Love too. We've got I got so many websites.
I'll have you got a website for that as well.
Yeah, we have a website for that too. Yeah, it's a really great relationship.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry I can't say. Thank you all for hanging in with waiting and listening.
I appreciate everybody hanging in as well. Some people had to jump off, but obviously, thank you so much for being here. And next week we're on Tuesday next week with Ken Manning, so look forward to that. And somebody just said aloha. I'm glad I heard your aloha.
Yep.
Yeah.
Aloha.
Take care, everybody. See you next week, hopefully. If you want to hang on, Christine.
Sure.
Oh, okay. Hang on a minute. Let me stop the recording.